Why was she the only one who could see it? The others laughed, joked, planned for tomorrow's mission like it was routine. To them, it was just another convoy run. To her, it felt like walking blind into a storm. Sat alone in her quarters, the glow of a salvaged comms terminal flickering against the dust-caked walls. The message on its cracked screen wasn't official, wasn't authorized, wasn't even supposed to exist. Yet it pulsed with a weight she couldn't ignore. Echo 74. Overwatch vulnerability identified. Tomorrow's convoy route is compromised. Her breath caught. No sender, no authentication, just that cryptic tag and a string of grid coordinates. To the rest of the base, the terminal was junk, a scavenged husk pulled from a wrecked drone. To her, it was alive. She had spent weeks repairing it in secret, teaching herself its language, coaxing broken circuits back into a heartbeat. The others thought she was studying anatomy or running inventory. They didn't know she was tracing shadows across encrypted channels, pulling ghosts from static. She leaned closer. The words didn't waver. Echo 74's warning was real. Too precise, too deliberate, too aligned with what her own eyes had already seen. She closed them, and the terrain map burned against the inside of her lids, the ridge line, the planned overwatch, and the low-lying wadi to the east, the perfect no one else seemed to notice. And yet she wasn't supposed to see it either. Not really. She was a medic. Her world was bandages, IVs, and tourniquets, not firing lines and ambush predictions. But her father hadn't raised her to ignore what was in front of her eyes. He'd raised her to measure wind by the sway of leaves, to breathe with patience, to fire between heartbeats. A medic by title, a marksman by blood. She brushed her thumb over the locket at her throat, the one piece of her father she still carried. Inside, etched in microscopic script, his final message: precision is what remains when chaos takes everything else. The base outside pulsed with its rhythm, generators humming, boots scuffing against gravel, men laughing too loudly to hide their nerves, felt separate from it all, like a ghost haunting the edges of their brotherhood. They called her Doc, their sister, their caretaker. They meant it with affection, but it chained her than any regulation. Doc patched wounds. Doc took notes at briefings. Doc stayed behind when the rifles spoke. But Doc also saw what they didn't. Her thoughts drifted back to Afghanistan, to the day she'd been forced to wait while a young Marine bled out on the dirt. Protocol had kept her frozen. By the time she reached him, his skin was cold. His eyes had begged for help, and all she could give him was silence. That memory never left. It burned like a brand each time someone reminded her to stay in her lane. And now this. Another warning. Another trap no one believed existed, and her caught between obedience and the unbearable weight of knowing. She pressed the heel of her hands into her eyes, trying to steady her racing mind. Sleep wouldn't come tonight, not with the convoy hours away and the echo of her father's voice whispering through memory. Precision is what remains. When dawn crept over the Jordanian desert, painting the horizon in pale gold, was already awake. She slipped into her uniform with the ritual calm of someone bracing for a storm. The mess hall buzzed with easy chatter, Staff Sergeant Vance teasing someone about rations, Miller boasting about range scores. Carried her tray, sat at the edge, and smiled when spoken to. Always polite, always quiet, always unseen. "So, Doc," Vance said through a grin, "heard you were down at the range again. 10-ring with a sidearm, huh? Not bad. But leave the long guns to us knuckle-draggers, yeah." He chuckled, meaning no harm. The words slid into her like a knife. She smiled faintly, the practiced mask of someone who had learned not to argue. To him, it was banter. To her, it was dismissal. He couldn't see the hours she spent tracing ballistics by candlelight, couldn't hear the echo of her father correcting her trigger pull when she was barely tall enough to hold the rifle steady. When the briefing came, she stood at the back, pen in hand, her role clear: casualties, contingencies, medevac timings. Commander Colt Rock's voice was iron steady as he outlined the plan. Overwatch on the ridge. Convoy moving through the valley. Secure, predictable routine. Except it was. Her pulse pounded as she studied the projected maps. She saw the same flaw she'd seen last night, the same blind spot Echo 74 had warned of. Her gut twisted. She waited until the room had cleared, then approached the commander. "Sir," she began, voice measured, "there's a low wadi east of the Overwatch. If hostile elements use it for concealment, they'll have line of sight before our snipers do. I believe it's a serious risk." Rock's eyes narrowed, not with anger but with a kind of cold patience reserved for subordinates who didn't understand their place. "Specialist, your analysis is noted, but has run that ridge for weeks. He knows it. The position is secure. Your focus is on medicine, not tactics. Is that understood?" The dismissal landed like a physical blow. She saluted, turned away, and felt the dread sink deeper into her chest. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't wrong by his rules. But he couldn't see what she saw. None of them could. That night she lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling as shadows lengthened. The whispers of the terminal's fan filled the silence. And then a flicker, a new message. Echo 74, Overwatch vulnerability confirmed, enemy assets moving, grid coordinates attached. Her throat tightened. This wasn't theory anymore. This wasn't a prediction. It was happening right where she had warned them. She sat motionless, the glow washing her face in cold blue. Fear pressed against her ribs, but beneath it surged something fiercer, defiance. They could strip her of range access. They could laugh at her sidearm practice. They could relegate her to bandages and plasma bags. But they could not erase what she knew. They could not silence the truth echoing through her veins, the truth her father had carved into her bones. Her hands hovered over the keys. She shouldn't. She knew the risk. Unauthorized transmission was grounds for reassignment, maybe worse. But so was silence. So was watching the ambush unfold while pretending she hadn't seen it coming. Her fingers typed with surgical steadiness. Echo 74 acknowledged. Recommend shifting Overwatch 200 meters northwest. Higher elevation. Clear line of sight into the wadi. Secondary patrol to cover flank. Send. The message disappeared into encrypted static. A shot in the dark. A rebellion measured in keystrokes. She leaned back, heart hammering, knowing there was no undoing it now. Outside, the desert slept under a canopy of stars. Inside, prepared for a morning she already knew would break something, protocol, trust, or perhaps herself. Because she wasn't just a medic, not anymore. And tomorrow, when the convoy rolled into the valley, everyone would learn just how dangerous it was to ignore the quiet voice at the edge of the room. Why did silence feel heavier than gunfire? Sat in the med bay, stethoscope draped around her neck, hands motionless against the sterile white of the counter. Outside, engines rumbled. The convoy was already forming up, the rhythmic thud of boots on gravel carrying through the walls like a pulse she couldn't match. Through the window she could see them, Vance adjusting his gear, McAllen cradling the like a trusted limb, Rock giving clipped orders with his steady, unbreakable voice. To them, it was another mission. To her, it was a countdown. Her throat tightened as the last trucks rolled out the gate. She glanced at the salvaged terminal in the corner of her quarters, still glowing faintly with Echo 74's coordinates. It was the proof, the whisper in the dark that had confirmed what she already knew. And yet she was here, grounded, leashed to her station with gauze and morphine while her team drove headlong into a trap. Her hand drifted to her locket. Her father's voice was so vivid it almost cut through the weight pressing down on her chest. Precision is what remains when chaos takes everything else. He hadn't just meant rifles. He had meant choices, timing, the courage to act when order crumbled. But right now she had no choice. Protocol was the chain, Rock's order was the lock, and she was the prisoner. Hours bled into each other like sand through cracked glass. The base was quiet, too quiet. Operators who weren't on the mission lounged in the mess, joked about cards, filled the air with noise that meant nothing. Sat alone, pretending to check her supplies, pretending not to hear the silence on the comms. Then it came, a crackle of static, a voice, sharp, strained, breaking through the quiet like a scream in a cathedral. "Ghost is down," McAllen's hit. Froze, her stomach dropped so hard it hurt. She didn't breathe. The transmission erupted again, Vance's voice, frantic, unrecognizable under panic. "Shrapnel, Williams is down. I can't, enemy, moving on us, they've got the ridge." His words dissolved into chaos. Gunfire thundered over the frequency. The comms drowned in static and overlapping shouts. His chair scraped back so fast it toppled. She was already on her feet, already reaching for her bag. Every fiber of her being screamed to move, to run, to reach them. The base command tent was alive now, officers shouting, maps scattered across the table, Rock's voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Air support is delayed. Reinforcements are 40 minutes out." 40 minutes. The convoy was 15 away from the kill zone. His pulse slammed in her ears. She pushed forward, breaking the line of operators crowding the table. "Sir, let me go. I can take McAllen's position. The still in play. I know the angles, the blind spot." Rock's head snapped up, his eyes locked on hers, cold, furious. "Out of the question." "Sir, with respect." "You are a medic." His voice was iron. "Your post is here. Do not mistake desperation for permission." The tent went silent. Officers looked away, embarrassed for her, swallowed hard, chest burning. But inside something broke. Not her resolve that had been forged long ago, in failure, in loss. What broke was her obedience. She stepped back, saluted, forced her voice steady. "Understood, sir." Rock turned away, already moving on to the next impossible order. He didn't see the decision forming in her eyes. She walked out of the command tent, boots striking the packed earth with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Each step carried her further from protocol, closer to something far more dangerous, her own truth. In her quarters, the air was still, almost waiting. She dropped to her knees and pulled open the compartment beneath her bunk. One by one, she laid out the tools she had hidden for months. A custom optics set, a spiral notebook filled with hand-drawn ballistics charts, tactical gloves worn smooth with practice. Her hands didn't shake. They moved with purpose, with the calm precision of someone who had lived in this moment 1,000 times in secret. First, the medical kit, tourniquets, dressings, clotting agents. Her oath would always come first, to save lives. Then the optics, polished to clarity sharper than any issued scope. Then the notebook, pages stained with sweat and time, proof of her preparation. Finally, the gloves. She slid them on slowly, feeling the weight settle into her bones. She wasn't abandoning who she was. She was becoming everything she had always been. By the time she stepped into the fatting desert light, the decision was complete. The base behind her hummed with blind chaos. Ahead, the ridge roared with real chaos. And between the two, one medic walked into the fire carrying more than protocol ever allowed. She stole a pickup, plain white, dust-choked and unremarkable. The guards barely looked at her as she drove out the gate. Who would stop Doc? She wasn't a threat. She wasn't a rifle. She wasn't anyone to worry about. The desert opened before her, vast, cruel, beautiful. Gunfire echoed faintly over the wind, a terrible metronome counting down lives. She pressed the accelerator, eyes scanning the terrain she had studied for months. Every ridge line was familiar. Every shadow carried the weight of her predictions. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. Fear had burned away, leaving only a sharp clarity. She parked in the shadow of an outcrop and began the climb on foot, boots sliding against loose shale, lungs burning with the dry air. Each step felt heavier, but her body carried her forward with the quiet endurance she had built in secret runs no one thought mattered. Closer now, the ridge loomed, alive with muzzle flashes. She could hear Vance shouting, McAllen groaning in pain. The smell of smoke and cordite licked the air, thick and bitter. Her comms crackled to life as she pressed against a rock. Vance's voice panicked. "We're pinned. Convoy's almost here, we can't." She cut in, her voice steady, grounding. "Vance, it's Doc, I'm on the ridge." There was a stunned pause, then disbelief. "Doc, what the hell, get back, this isn't." But she was already moving, cresting the ridge. The sight hit her like a blow. McAllen sprawled in blood, arm mangled, face ashen. Vance crouched behind cover, rifle spitting short bursts, eyes wild. And there beside them, the lay in the dirt, useless, abandoned. The chaos was here. And she was ready. How many lives could a single decision hold? The ridge was chaos. Dust clawed at the air, gunfire cracked from the wadi below, and the medic everyone thought too fragile to fight was suddenly standing where no one had expected her. Dropped to her knees beside McAllen. His arm was shredded, blood poolsing through the makeshift bandage Vance had thrown together in desperation. She ripped open her bag, voice calm, cutting through the storm like a scalpel. "Pressure dressing, tourniquet high, he's got minutes, not hours." McAllen's eyes fluttered, pain etched into every line of his face. Yet when they locked onto hers, something steadied in them. He knew. He'd seen battlefield calm before. What he hadn't seen was a medic whose hands worked this fast, this sure under fire. Her gloves were slick with blood, but her focus never wavered. She tightened the bandage until the flow slowed, checked his pulse, then injected a measured dose of painkiller. "Stay with me. You're not leaving this ridge." Beside her, Vance fired wildly, trying to keep the advancing fighters pinned. He risked a glance back, shouting over the roar, "Doc, we're losing it. That rifle's dead weight." His gaze flicked to its massive frame sprawled in the dirt, barrel dark, scope glinting in the fatting sun. She felt it before she even reached for it. The inevitability, the gravity of a path chosen long ago. She finished tightening McAllen's bandage, then stood. Her breath caught, chest rising slow and steady. The battlefield noise dimmed for a moment, as if waiting for her next move. Vance's shout was half command, half plea. "Doc, don't." But she was already lowering herself into prone, sliding behind as if her body remembered a rhythm older than fear. The cold metal against her cheek, the weight in her shoulder, it wasn't unfamiliar. It was home. Her father's voice ghosted through memory. "Breathe between the heartbeats. Don't force it. Let the silence guide you." Through the scope, the world narrowed. Dust, smoke, scattered shadows of men moving fast along the wadi. They thought the ridge was broken. They thought the was silenced. They didn't see her. Her crosshairs settled on the first figure breaking cover. She felt the pause between her heartbeats. She squeezed. The roar shattered the ridge. A physical wave slammed into her shoulder, thunder rolling across the desert. The target vanished in a mist of dust and silence. Vance froze mid-breath, mouth open, eyes wide. He'd seen plenty of clean shots. He'd never seen that. Exhaled slowly, cycling the bolt with a precision born from years in secret. She didn't look at him. Didn't explain. There was no time. Another figure broke left, low and fast. She tracked, adjusted, squeezed. Another thunderclap. Another body fell. The battlefield shifted. What had been a relentless push from below faltered. The enemy had expected 2 SEALs and a medic pinned down. They hadn't expected the medic to pick up the thunder of God's rifle and wield it like she'd been born for it. Vance's voice came low, shaken, awed. "Doc, what the hell are you?" She didn't answer. Words had no place here, only precision. McAllen groaned, shifting against the rock. His voice was hoarse but steady, carrying the authority of 15 years behind a scope. "Doc, you have the eye. I'll call the shots. You fire." His throat tightened. It wasn't an order, it was trust. From the man who defined what a sniper was. She adjusted the scope, listening as McAllen rasped out bearings. "Target wadi mouth, 2 o'clock, 600 meters. Crosswind left to right, 6 knots. Aim high by half a mil." She steadied, adjusted, fired. The thundered again, the recoil slamming her shoulder but leaving her steady, anchored. Through the scope she saw the figure crumple, dust blooming around him. Vance's disbelief gave way to something sharper, relief. He dropped back into rhythm, spotting and calling targets with urgency. Two more, 10 o'clock, moving fast between rocks. McAllen gritted his teeth, pain making his voice raw, but his corrections were crisp. Compensate smoke drift, half breath, now. She fired, and again. Each shot ripped the chaos back into control, carving silence into the battlefield one body at a time. Minutes blurred into a brutal rhythm. Fire, adjust, fire. Then back to McAllen, checking the bandage, pressing gauze, whispering reassurance. Then back to the rifle, scope to eye, crosshairs on target. Two lives at once, healer and killer, medic and sniper, fused into a single unstoppable purpose. The convoy's radio crackled through Vance's headset, voice strained with panic. "Base, this is convoy lead. We're approaching the kill zone. Do we have overwatch?" Vance glanced at, then back down the scope of his binoculars. His voice steadied, disbelief melting into awe. "Convoy, this is overwatch. You're covered. Move through." The line of armored trucks rolled into the valley below, dust clouds trailing, engines groaning. Enemy fire erupted toward them, but each position was met with surgical thunder. Shots carved the ambush apart before it could swallow the convoy whole. Inside the command tent miles away, Rock listened to the radio traffic in stunned silence. Reports came in rapid bursts, enemy suppressed, convoy advancing, overwatch holding. But none of it made sense. Was down. Vance was just a spotter, who was firing. Then a young comms operator, pale, voice shaking, called out, "Sir, they're calling her Doc." The spotter talking to Doc. The word hung heavy, impossible. Rock's chest tightened. He'd given the order. He'd locked her behind medical duties. And now she was out there, defying him, rewriting everything he thought he knew. On the ridge, the firefight ebbed. The last enemy fighters scattered, retreating under the weight of precision they couldn't match. Smoke thinned. Silence settled, broken only by the ragged breaths of three figures huddled against stone. Lowered her body trembling not from fear but from release. The world came rushing back, the screams, the blood, the acrid taste of gunpowder. Her shoulder ached from recoil. Her hands were still stained with McAllen's blood. She sat back, staring at the rifle, at what she had just done, at what she had become. McAllen's voice was weak but sure. "Doc, you just saved a convoy. Don't ever let anyone tell you what you can't be." Vance looked at her, expression caught between awe and something close to guilt. "We were wrong," he said quietly. "All of us." The sound of approaching helicopters cut through the moment. Reinforcements, medics, command, judgment. Closed her eyes, steadying her breath. The battle was over, but the real fight was only beginning. Why did the thrum of helicopters feel heavier than the roar of gunfire? The ridge had fallen silent, enemy fire pushed back into the desert, the convoy crawling safely through the valley below. For 15 minutes, had balanced on a knife's edge medic and sniper, healer and executioner. She had held the line no one believed she could. But now the air shook with rotor blades, a different storm bearing down. The Chinook descended in a fury of dust and sand, kicking the battlefield into a haze. Reinforcements poured out, medics with stretchers, operators with rifles, officers with clipped voices. The cavalry had arrived, too late to change the fight but right on time to change her fate. Wiped blood and grit from her face, forcing her hands to stay steady. She knelt one last time beside McAllen, checking the bandage, whispering reassurance. "Stay with me. You're going to get proper care now." His pain-ridden nod was enough. Then the shadows fell over her. Commander Colt Rock strode through the dust cloud, posture iron, eyes locked on her with a storm of fury and disbelief. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His silence was heavier than any reprimand. Rose slowly, shoulders squared, boots anchored to the dirt. The lay at her feet, smoking barrel pointed skyward like an accusation. Her gloves were stained with blood and powder. She looked every bit the contradiction she was, a medic with a sniper's soul. Rock stopped a few feet away, his jaw clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, more dangerous than a scream. "Specialist, I gave you a direct order." The words cut like steel. She met his eyes. Her voice was quiet, steady. "Yes, sir, you did. You disobeyed. You abandoned your station. You compromised the chain of command." Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "And I saved the convoy, sir." For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Dust swirled between them, the wounded groaned behind them, and two truths collided in the air, one of protocol, the other of survival. Rock's eyes burned with anger and something else, something harder to name. He wanted to condemn her, but the battlefield around them refused to give him permission. Too many men alive because of her. Too many facts impossible to bury. Behind him, McAllen's voice broke the silence, ragged but unyielding. "Commander, she's the reason I'm still breathing. She's the reason that convoy isn't a graveyard. He coughed, pain cutting him off. Vance stepped forward, dust and sweat streaking his face. His voice cracked with raw conviction. "Sir, I don't know what the hell just happened, but I know this: without Doc, we'd all be body bags right now." Rock's glare snapped to him, then back to her. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the pounding of rotor blades and the weight of judgment waiting to fall. Then another voice cut through, calm, measured, carrying authority beyond rank. "Interesting report you've got here, Commander." The crowd shifted. A woman stepped off the second helicopter, uniform pressed sharp despite the dust, eyes cutting through the haze like scalpels. Colonel Rain, Regional Command. Her presence alone sent a ripple of unease through the gathered operators. This wasn't just a debrief. This was oversight. Rock snapped to attention. "Colonel." Rain barely looked at him. Her gaze locked onto, studied her with unnerving precision, as if she already knew more than she should. She walked past Rock, past the others, and stopped directly in front of. "Specialist," she said softly, almost conversational, though every ear strained to hear. 12 confirmed kills. A convoy saved. Operated without clearance, and a direct order disobeyed. Swallowed, bracing for the hammer. But Rain's expression didn't harden. Instead, something flickered in her eyes: recognition. "You must be your father's daughter." The words hit like a detonation. Staggered a half-step, breath-catching. No one here knew about her father. She guarded that piece of her past like a classified file. Yet Rain said it with certainty, as though she'd been waiting for this moment. The colonel leaned in slightly, voice lowering, intimate. "Did he ever teach you the crosswind trick, with the blade of grass?" His throat constricted. The memory flashed: a Swedish field, her father's steady hands, the laughter when she misjudged the drift and sent a round wide. The trick had been theirs alone. Tears pricked at her eyes. Her voice broke, but she forced it out. "Yes, ma'am, he did." The colonel's lips curved into the faintest smile. She straightened, turning toward Rock. Her voice sharpened into command. "This isn't an investigation into insubordination. This is a debriefing on tactical success." Rock stiffened, caught between anger and obedience. "Colonel." "You'll get your say, Commander," Rain cut him off smoothly. "But first, you'll listen. Specialist will provide a full account. Her methodology, her rationale, her training. And you will hear it. This is not about punishment, it's about learning." The operators exchanged uneasy glances. Vance exhaled in relief. McAllen, pale and fatting, allowed a ghost of a smile. Stood frozen, torn between disbelief and exhaustion. She had prepared for chains, for reprimands, for exile. Instead, she was being pulled into the center, not as a liability, but as the very reason they were alive. The helicopters roared again, medics loading McAllen onto a stretcher, Vance helping with quiet reverence. Rain gestured toward the aircraft, her eyes still locked on. "Come. You've got a room full of officers waiting to hear what you just did. Let's not keep them guessing." As they boarded, felt the desert fall away behind her. The ridge where she had broken every rule was already receding into memory, but its weight followed her. She looked down at her hands, one still stained with blood, the other still trembling faintly from the recoil of the two truths she could no longer separate. She was both, she would always be both. And for the first time, someone in authority didn't just see it, they demanded it. Why did the silence of a conference room feel sharper than the chaos of gunfire? Sat at a long table in a sterile, makeshift command center. No dust here, no roar of rifles, no smell of blood, just cold air and colder stares. A panel of senior officers lined the opposite side, their uniforms crisp, their faces unreadable. Folders lay open before them, her record, her reprimands, her battlefield miracle. Beside them, Commander Colt Rock sat rigid, his jaw locked, eyes forward. For years had been the shadow at the back of rooms like this. Quiet, overlooked, expected only to take notes on medical contingencies. Now every gaze cut directly into her. Colonel Rain sat at the head of the table. Calm, unshaken, her eyes never leaving, she spoke without flourish, her tone simple, steady. "Specialist, you'll recount the events of the last 48 hours. Include your rationale. Leave nothing out." His chest tightened. She forced herself to breathe slow. There was no script for this, no protocol to hide behind. Only truth, dangerous and undeniable. Her voice began quietly, almost fragile. The message came first, through a salvaged terminal, Echo 74. It confirmed what I had already seen, a blind spot in Overwatch, a vulnerability the enemy could use. I tried to raise it after briefing, but my analysis was dismissed. Protocol held. A few officers shifted in their seats. One scribbled a note. She continued, steadier now. When the warning repeated with grid coordinates, I couldn't stay silent. I encoded a message, a patch suggestion. Small adjustments to Overwatch. No came. She swallowed. But I knew the ambush would come. Colonel Rain's eyes narrowed with interest. Rock's jaw flexed, his silence iron. Pressed on, she described the moment the attack hit. Vance's frantic calls, McAllen bleeding, the convoy minutes from slaughter. Reinforcements were 40 minutes out. The was down. It was over unless someone picked up that rifle. She paused, her hands tightening in her lap. The memory still vibrated in her bones. "I stabilized McAllen first, then I took the shot." Her words hung in the air like the echo of the rifle itself. One officer, older, skeptical, leaned forward. "You're not sniper qualified. How could you possibly operate it with that precision?" Her throat tightened, the moment she had dreaded, the truth she had buried for years. She looked down, fingers brushing the locket at her throat. Then she lifted her gaze, steady now. "Because I've been training for it since I was a child." The panel murmured. Rain tilted her head slightly. "Explain." "So told them." She spoke of Sweden, of her father, a special operations marksman who had raised her with a rifle as naturally as other fathers taught daughters to ride bikes. She told of long winter mornings, of learning to breathe with the wind, of winning national competitions before she was old enough to drive. She spoke of the day he died, a training accident that stole him but left her with a philosophy carved into her soul. Precision is what remains when chaos takes everything else. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "I carried that into the military, but I was assigned as a medic, and every time I tried to train beyond that I was told to stay in my lane, so I studied in secret. I read manuals under medical journals, drew my own ballistics charts, practiced on the range until they took my access. My skills didn't vanish. They waited." The room was silent now, transfixed. She pressed on. "I never wanted to be more than a medic, but I refused to be less than what I was trained to be. When Afghanistan taught me what it means to be too late, when a Marine bled out because I couldn't reach him in time, I swore never again. Not if I had the power to prevent it. Her words cracked. She swallowed hard, forcing calm. On that ridge, I wasn't disobeying for arrogance. I was disobeying because silence would have killed every man in that convoy. My oath is to save lives. That's what I did, even if it meant breaking every rule you gave me. She stopped. The weight of her confession filled the room like smoke. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the testimonies began. McAllen, arm in a sling, pale but fierce, entered and stood before the panel. His voice was gravel, raw from blood loss and pain, but every syllable carried 15 years of credibility. I've served with SEAL snipers across continents. I know what skill looks like. What she did wasn't luck. It was mastery. She saved me, she saved Vance, and she saved that mission. If you think otherwise, you weren't there. His words hit like artillery. The panel scribbled furiously, some nodding, some frowning in disbelief. Next was Vance. He didn't speak in statistics or tactical jargon. He spoke like a man confessing guilt. I treated her like a little sister, like someone who needed protection. I thought I knew her limits. And then I watched her lie down behind and do what I couldn't even imagine. It broke me. It humbled me. And it saved me. If we'd listened to her earlier, maybe none of us would have been on that ridge in the first place. He turned to, his voice soft but steady. We were wrong about you, all of us. Lowered her gaze, throat tightening, the words both vindicating and unbearable. Finally, Commander Rock rose. The room stilled. Everyone waited for the hammer to fall. He stood tall, posture carved from stone. His voice was low, steady, heavy with conflict. I gave an order. It was disobeyed. And by every measure of our system, that is unacceptable. The officers leaned forward, pens poised. Rock paused, his eyes locking on. For the first time, his mask cracked. But I also saw results. Results no one else could have delivered. She did what protocol could not. She did what I could not. And in doing so, she forced me to see that our system, my system, failed her before she ever failed it. A stunned murmur rippled through the room. Rock exhaled, shoulders heavy. I was wrong, not about the importance of orders, but about her, and maybe about what a soldier can be. His chest ached at his words. They weren't forgiveness. They weren't condemnation. They were something harder, something truer. Colonel Rain finally rose, her presence cutting the air. She glanced at the panel, then back to, You've heard the testimonies. You've seen the results. This isn't just about specialists. It's about the future of special operations. Her gaze softened slightly, almost imperceptible. You've done more than save lives. You've forced us to reconsider what we thought was possible. Sat frozen, heart pounding. She had walked into this room expecting the end of her career. Instead, something else was forming. Not acquittal, not yet, but the spark of recognition that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't a mistake to punish. She was a lesson to learn. The silence stretched, then Rain spoke again, final and unflinching. The verdict will be delivered tomorrow. Dismissed. Rose slowly, legs heavy, every eye following her as she left the room. Back in the hallway, the noise of the base returned, boots, radios, the faint thrum of distant engines. But none of it felt real. She leaned against the wall, exhaling hard, her hands trembling. For the first time, the fear wasn't of being ignored. It was of being seen. Why did waiting feel like the hardest battle of all? The firefights had been brutal. The ridge had nearly broken her, but nothing compared to the silence of this night. Sat alone in her quarters, the salvaged terminal dark for the first time in weeks. No messages from Echo 74. No warnings, just stillness. Her medical bag rested by her bunk, stained and worn. The thunder still echoed in her bones, but here it was only memory. She hadn't been confined, not formally, but she didn't need shackles to know she was bound. Tomorrow the panel would speak, and whatever they said would cut deeper than any enemy round. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of generators. Her mind replayed every choice, ignoring protocol, firing without clearance, pulling the trigger again and again. She told herself it had been the only way, and yet the question gnawed, had she done it for them or for herself? When dawn came, the base stirred alive with routine, boots on gravel, shouted orders, the smell of burnt coffee. For everyone else, it was another day. For her, it was Judgment Day. The summons came swift and formal. 2 MPs escorted her to the command building. Not hostile, not rough, just precise. She walked between them, head high, each step heavy with the weight of possibility. Inside the briefing hall, the same officers sat where they had before, Rock at their side, rigid as stone. McAllen and Vance stood in the back, their presence uninvited but unchallenged. And at the head, Colonel Rain, posture unyielding, gaze unreadable. Took her seat. The air was sharp, sterile, her pulse drummed in her ears. Rain's voice cut through the silence. Specialist, this panel has reviewed your actions in combat on the 23rd of August. You disobeyed a direct order. You abandoned your assigned role. You engaged in unauthorized combat operations. The words landed like hammer blows, each one true, each one a stone stacked higher. Rain paused, letting the weight settle. Then her tone shifted, softer but sharper still. You also saved 12 lives in your immediate unit. You saved an entire convoy of 31 personnel. You prevented enemy seizure of classified equipment. And you demonstrated skills that no record of training accounts for. A murmur rippled through the officers. His throat burned. Rain rose, moving slowly, deliberately, until she stood in front of. By the book, your actions demand disciplinary action, reassignment, perhaps discharge. Inhaled steady, understood, ma'am. But Rain's eyes narrowed, cutting deeper. And yet, what does the book know of survival? What does the book know of silence in the moments when lives hang by a thread? No one spoke. Even Rock's jaw unclenched slightly, his eyes flicking toward as if waiting. Rain circled slowly, her voice gathering weight. We sit in rooms like this and argue doctrine. She knelt on a ridge and bled for truth. You ask me what justice is. I ask you, what would justice have been if she had obeyed? The room froze under the question. Rain stopped beside the head chair, hands gripping its back. Therefore, this panel does not recommend punishment. Instead, we issue recognition. Specialist is hereby commended for valor in combat. The air shifted like a release of pressure. His breath caught, chest tightening with disbelief. Commended, not condemned. But Rain wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, her unique demands review. Effective immediately, Specialist will be seconded to advanced training and evaluation under my directive. Her medical role will continue, but with expanded parameters. She is no longer just a medic. She is a dual asset. Gasps broke the silence. Vance's lips parted in shock. McAllen, pale but steady, smiled faintly. Sat motionless. Commendation, training, dual asset. Words that should have felt like victory. Instead, they pressed into her with the weight of something larger: expectation, responsibility, a path she hadn't chosen but couldn't walk away from. Rock finally spoke, his voice low, reluctant but resolute. Colonel, with respect, you're rewriting doctrine around a single operator. Rain's gaze cut to him. No, Commander, she rewrote it for us. I am merely acknowledging the ink. Rock's mouth tightened, but he said nothing more. Rain turned back to. Her tone softened just enough for only to feel it. You broke silence when silence would have killed. Remember that. But know this, the price of being heard is that you will never be invisible again. Swallowed hard, eyes burning, she forced herself to nod. Yes, ma'am. The session ended, papers signed, folders closed, officers filed out, murmuring about precedent and doctrine. In the hallway, Vance caught her arm. His grin was crooked, his voice raw. Doc, they just pinned valor on you. Do you even get what that means? She shook her head, dazed. It doesn't feel like victory. His grin faded. He studied her, then spoke quietly. Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe it's just the truth catching up to you. McAllen, leaning against the wall with his sling, met her eyes. "Doc, don't lose yourself in what they want to make you. You saved us because you were both healer and shooter. Don't let them strip either away." His words sank deep. The path ahead was unclear, but one truth anchored her. She couldn't separate the two parts of herself anymore. She was both, always would be. That night, as the base settled, she sat again in her quarters. The terminal flickered to life on its own. A message, simple, cryptic. Echo 74. Recognition is survival, but survival is never free. Her chest tightened. Who was Echo 74? How much did they know? And why did their words feel less like comfort and more like warning? She closed her eyes, hearing again her father's voice, the moral he had etched into her bones. Precision is what remains when chaos takes everything else. She whispered into the empty room, "But what remains when precision takes me?" The silence offered no answer, only the weight of the future pressing in. Why did training feel more dangerous than combat? The battlefield had been brutal, but it was honest. Bullets flew, blood spilled, choices were immediate. Here in the sterile halls of advanced training, the danger was quieter, sharper. Doubt, scrutiny, the constant threat of becoming a symbol instead of a soldier. Arrived at a secure facility weeks after the verdict. It wasn't a base she knew. No desert dust, no half-broken terminals. The compound was carved into stone, precise and cold. Every step echoed. Every wall seemed to whisper judgment. Colonel Rain had not accompanied her. She'd simply handed her orders, sharp and final: evaluation, integration, dual-role development. The rest was left to fate. Her first morning began before dawn. She entered the training ground to find 20 operators waiting, men and women, hardened, skeptical. Some were snipers, others medics, all seasoned in their lanes. They had gathered to witness the anomaly. The instructor, a tall man with a scar across his temple, addressed them with clipped authority. "You all know why we're here. Specialist, combat medic, commended for valor, claimed proficiency with the 50. Today we find out what's truth and what's accident." He gestured to the firing line, arrested on its bipod, gleaming in the morning light. Targets stretched out to 1,000 meters. The silence was suffocating. Stepped forward, gloves in hand. She laid them on, slow and steady, like a ritual. Her heart beat hard, but her face betrayed nothing. Whispers rippled through the ranks. "She's just a medic. Lucky shot, that's all. Weight, recoil breaks her shoulder." She lowered herself into prone, cheek against cold steel. The world narrowed through the scope. She felt the air, the faint crosswind, the weight of breath in her chest. Her father's voice guided her, between the heartbeats. The first shot cracked, the thundered, the target at 800 meters shattered. Murmurs cut off, silence. She cycled the bolt, fired again. 1,000 meters, hit again, 900, hit. Each shot was steady, precise. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't proving them wrong. She was simply being who she had always been. The instructor's face betrayed nothing, but his voice softened just slightly. "Confirmed, proceed." But shooting was only half the test. That afternoon she was dragged into a medical drill. A live simulation, chaos staged in a blown-out building. Smoke, blood packs, screaming actors. Her task: stabilize 3 wounded while hostile fire crackled overhead. She moved fast, steady, tourniquet here, chest seal there. Morphine measured, precise. Her gloves were slick again, but her hands didn't falter. Then the twist came. One of the casualties was scripted to die. No intervention would save him. It was a test of acceptance. Medics learned early that they couldn't save everyone. Froze, eyes on the man convulsing, blood pumping in rhythmic bursts. She knew the script. She knew the truth. But her chest burned, memories flooding back, the Marine in Afghanistan she had failed to reach, the oath she had sworn never to abandon again. Her hands trembled. For one dangerous second, she considered breaking protocol again, pushing beyond the simulation, refusing to let go. But she forced herself still. She whispered, voice breaking, "I'm sorry," and turned to save the others. When the drill ended, sweat soaked her uniform, her face streaked with ash. The instructor pulled her aside. His voice was low, almost kind. "You can't win every fight. Learn that now, or it'll kill you later." She nodded, but her chest ached with the weight of letting go. The weeks stretched into grueling rhythm. Days on the range, nights in the medic bay. One moment a healer, the next a killer. Her peers circled her with suspicion. Some softened. Most did not. At meals, conversations fell silent when she sat down. In the gym, whispers followed her. Instructors pushed harder, daring her to break. And yet, piece by piece, something shifted. One night after a brutal endurance test, she sat on the steps outside the barracks, lungs burning. A young operator dropped beside her, a sniper candidate, sharp-eyed, skeptical. He spoke without looking at her. "You scare them, you know. Not because you failed, because you didn't." She looked at him, puzzled. He shrugged. "We live in lanes. Medics heal, snipers kill. You did both. You're proof the lanes aren't walls, and that terrifies them." His words lodged deep, unsettling and liberating at once. But the true test came weeks later. A joint simulation, a staged ambush in mountain terrain, 2 squads, mixed roles, live fire with strict oversight, was assigned medic officially. But halfway through, their sniper went down. The squad froze, caught between retreat and collapse. Felt it, the weight of silence before slaughter, the moment she knew too well. She dropped beside the downed sniper, checked his pulse, then lifted his rifle in the same breath. The squad leader barked, "Stand down." But the ambush was already tightening. She had seconds. She fired, a clean hit, then another. The kill zone broke open, the squad surged forward, and the exercise ended in survival instead of failure. The evaluators were furious. She had broken assignment again. The doctrine still resisted her. But when the squad gathered, sweat-soaked and alive, one soldier clapped her shoulder. Another muttered, "Doc just saved our asses." And another, "Maybe she's not just Doc anymore." For the first time, acceptance flickered. Not universal, not permanent, but real. That night sat alone, watching the stars from the training ground. Her body ached, her mind throbbed, but her heart carried something new, not pride, not yet, but belonging. A dangerous kind of belonging, earned through disobedience and blood. The terminal in her quarters flickered again. Echo 74. Echo 74, they're shaping you. Not for what you are, for what they need. Be careful who writes your story. His fingers hovered over the keys. For weeks she had stayed silent. Tonight she typed a reply. "And what if I'm tired of silence?" The cursor blinked, then the reply came swift. Echo 74, then make sure your voice is your own, not theirs. She leaned back, heart racing. Somewhere beyond these walls, someone was watching. Someone who knew her father. Someone who understood. For the first time, she wondered if this path wasn't just about survival. Maybe it was about truth. And truth, she realized, was heavier than any rifle she'd ever carried. What would matter more when the moment came? The hand that healed, or the finger that pulled the trigger? The desert night was black and endless. Crouched on a ridge, the weight of her medical pack against her back, the balanced across her lap. Around her, a small team of operators prepared for insertion, their voices hushed, movements efficient. This wasn't training anymore. This was real. Her role was no longer just medic. On the mission roster beside her name, 2 words had been added, dual asset. It looked official, clean, almost ordinary, but nothing about it felt ordinary. The objective was simple on paper: an insurgent compound, intelligence to secure, hostages possibly inside. A routine raid, though everyone knew nothing in this country was routine. His task was to provide medical support and overwatch. The contradiction was brutal: save lives and take them, heal and destroy. She steadied her breath as the team moved out, boots in sand, rifles low. shadows blending with the night. The compound rose ahead, squat walls etched against starlight. They breached silently, doors blown open with controlled charges. The team fanned out, clearing rooms, shouting clipped confirmations. Stayed close but not too close, eyes scanning for casualties, ears tuned for the call. Then it came, medic. She ran, pack bouncing, heart hammering. A man lay on the floor, leg shredded by shrapnel. Blood poured fast. Dropped beside him, gloves snapping on, hands moving with practiced precision. Pressure, tourniquet, hold still, you're not done yet. Her world shrank to pulse, gauze, rhythm. She pressed until the flow slowed, injected pain relief, sealed the wound. His breathing steadied, his eyes locked on hers with a gratitude she couldn't bear. But then the other call came, urgent, shouted from the rooftop. Sniper, East Ridge, we're pinned. Her chest tightened. She finished the dressing, pressed the soldier's hand against it. Hold here, don't let go. She grabbed sprinted up the stairs 2 at a time, lungs burning. On the roof, 2 operators were pinned behind low walls, rounds cracking overhead. They looked at her, shock flashing in their eyes. She didn't waste time. She dropped prone, settled behind the scope, breath slow. Through the lens, the night split open. A glint of steel, the faint outline of a rifle, a sniper tucked into shadows on the ridge, patient, deadly, waiting to end lives. Her finger hovered on the trigger. But then movement. Next to the sniper, barely visible, a child, thin frame, crouched low, clutching something in his hands, watching. Froze. Her mind raced. If she fired, the recoil would be clean, the kill certain, but the concussion, the shrapnel, the risk of taking both lives was real. If she didn't fire, her team would die. The medic in her screamed, "Don't pull it, protect the innocent." The sniper in her whispered, "Take the shot, save your team." Her father's voice wove through both. Precision is what remains when chaos takes everything else. She exhaled, slowed her heart, adjusted half a degree, waited for the sniper to lean forward. Her finger squeezed. The thundered. Through the scope she saw the sniper collapse, body crumpling sideways. The child flinched, ears covered but untouched. His chest collapsed with relief. Precision had spared one life even as it ended another. She cycled the bolt, scanned, confirmed the ridge was clear. The team surged forward again, momentum restored. Down below, hostages were found, the compound cleared. The mission closed in survival, not tragedy. But couldn't shake the image of the child. The way innocence had stood inches from death, saved not by rules, not by doctrine, but by choice. Back at base, the debrief was quick. Success, hostages safe, enemy neutralized, commendations filed. The officers spoke in metrics, body counts, percentages. But sat apart, silent, hands folded. Vance dropped beside her, dirt streaked across his face, grin tired but true. "You did it again," he said softly. "Pulled us out of hell. Doc, sniper, whatever you are, you did it." She shook her head. Her voice was quiet, raw. "I don't know what I am." McAllen, his arm still in a sling, limped over. He lowered himself onto the bench with effort, eyes steady. "You're both, and that's exactly what makes you dangerous. To the enemy, to anyone who doubts you, even to yourself." She looked at him, searching for condemnation, but his gaze held only respect. That night, alone again in her quarters, the terminal flickered alive. Echo 74. Echo 74. Precision is a burden. Healing is a burden. Carry both, and you'll carry more weight than most men can stand. His hands hovered over the keys, heart pounding. She typed slowly. "Why me? Why not someone else?" The reply came fast. Echo 74. Because when the world told you to choose one, you chose both. That's what makes you unbreakable. She stared at the words until her vision blurred. Then she shut the terminal off. Outside, the desert stretched endless and silent. Stars burned cold above, indifferent to the wars below. She lay back on her bunk, breath slowing, eyes heavy. The day replayed in fragments the blood she'd staunched, the shot she'd fired, the child she'd spared. And she realized the truth she had been running from since the ridge. She wasn't meant to choose between the medic's oath and the sniper's trigger. She was meant to bear both, no matter the cost. Her father had been right. Precision was what remained when chaos took everything else. But tonight she added her own truth. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And on that ridge in that compound, in every silence yet to come, she would act.